The End of Lawyers. Rethinking the Nature of Legal Services. Richard Susskind. 8. Conclusion: The Future of Lawyers. The future for lawyers could be prosperous or disastrous. The arguments and findings of this book can support either end game. I predict that lawyers who are unwilling to change their working practices and extend their range of services will, in the coming decade, struggle to survive. Meanwhile, those who embrace new technologies and novel ways of sourcing legal work are likely to trade successfully for many years yet, even if they are not occupied with the law jobs that most law schools currently anticipate for their graduates. I believe that lawyers, in order to survive and prosper, must respond creatively and forcefully to the shifting demands of what is a rapidly evolving legal marketplace. In this chapter, I revisit some of the market forces that are at play and suggest what this means for various branches of the legal profession. I then go on to identify what types of legal businesses and lawyers will thrive in the new order. I make no attempt at this stage to praise the entire book. My main emphasis instead is on questions that flow from its title, The End of Lawyers. Will the changes I identify bring about the end of lawyers, or will a new and reinvigorated legal profession emerge? 8. The prognosis. My starting point for this final analysis is clients, especially in-house lawyers. Invariably, general counsel tell me that they are now under 3 pressures: to reduce the size of their in-house legal teams, to spend less on external law firms, and to find ways of coping with more and riskier legal and compliance work than they have had in the past. Both internally and externally, clients are requiring more for less. From to 2, I found this to be a running background theme in my discussions with in-house lawyers. In 2, in the slipstream of the economic downturn, it has become not so much a theme as an overriding imperative. For law firms, these pressures on clients and the imperative that follows have disturbing implications. Increasingly, for example, firms are being called upon to reduce their fees, to undertake work on a fixed fee rather than an hourly billing basis, and to be far more transparent in their dealings with clients. Also, they are coming to be selected, more than occasionally, on the advice of hard-nosed, in-house procurement specialists in client organizations rather than by old friends and colleagues. The legal market looks set to be a buyer's market for the foreseeable future. At the same time, new competitors are emerging, such as outsourcers and entrepreneurial publishers. While liberalization of the legal market will bring external funding and a new wave of professional managers and investors who have no nostalgic commitment to traditional business models for law firms, including hourly billing and gearing obtained through the deployment of armies of hardworking young lawyers. To cap it all, a number of disruptive legal technologies are emerging, such as document assembly, closed communities, legal open sourcing, and embedded legal knowledge. See Chapter 4, which will directly challenge and sometimes even replace the traditional work of lawyers. For many lawyers, therefore, it looks as if the party may soon be over. I anticipate that the market is likely to respond in 2 ways to the changes just noted. First, new methods, systems, and processes will emerge to reduce the cost of undertaking routine legal work. This will extend well beyond the back offices of legal businesses into the very heart of legal work. As I explain in Chapter 2, I expect there to be a strong pull by the market away from the delivery of legal advice on a bespoke basis. To achieve the efficiencies needed, I say that legal services will evolve from bespoke services at one end of a spectrum along a path, passing through the following stages: standardization, systematization, packaging, and commoditization. Many new ways of sourcing will emerge, and these will often be combined in the conduct of individual pieces of legal work. I call this multi-sourcing. These changes will affect not just high-volume, low-value work, but also the routine elements of high-value work. The second response by the market will be for clients in various ways to share the cost of legal services. Again, this will affect the entire market. In-house lawyers, I suggest, will frequently work together, often as part of online closed communities, see Section 4, and find ways of recycling legal work amongst themselves. In areas where their duplication of effort and expense is considerable, such as regulatory compliance, they will collaborate intensively and so spread the legal expense amongst their number. At the other end of the spectrum, citizens will have ready access to online legal guidance and to growing bodies of legal materials that are available on an open source basis, see Sections 4 and 7. More, they will be able to share legal experiences with one another. With clients cutting costs and finding alternative ways of sourcing work or sharing costs and collaborating regularly with one another, what does this mean for lawyers? On the strength of the arguments and findings of this book, I predict that there will be 5 types of lawyer in the future. The first will be the expert trusted advisor. This is the purveyor of bespoke legal service. The arguments of this book suggest that market pressures will generally discourage lawyers from handling matters in a bespoke manner wherever this is possible. Instead, standardized or computerized service will be preferred. However, on some occasions, bespoke work will be unavoidable. For the foreseeable future, intelligent creative lawyers will be needed in certain circumstances to fashion new solutions for clients who have novel, complex, or high-value challenges, the expert element, and to communicate guidance in a highly personalized way, the trusted component, where this is wanted. The end of the expert trusted advisor is not therefore in sight. The danger facing many lawyers, however, is to assume that their clients' work always requires this expert or trusted treatment. Lawyers who handcraft while their competitors introduce new efficiencies, computerizing or outsourcing, for example, will not be practicing in 10 years' time because bespoke service is a luxury that clients will not generally be able to afford. My second category of lawyer for the future will be the enhanced practitioner. This is the individual whose legal skills and knowledge are required not to deliver a bespoke service, but enhanced by modern techniques to work further to the right-hand side of the evolutionary path that I introduce in Section 2. This lawyer will be supporting the delivery of standardized, systematized, and when in-house, packaged legal service. The crucial point here, though, is that the market will only tolerate this lawyer's involvement where legal experience is genuinely needed. Otherwise, other less costly sources of support will be favored, such as paralegals, legal executives, and legal process outsourcing service providers. Today, clients frequently pay lawyers to do work that intelligent and trained non-lawyers could undertake. This will stop in years to come, and the need for lawyers who perform routine work will diminish accordingly. In contrast, there will be a much greater need for my third category of lawyer, the legal knowledge engineer. If I am right and legal service will increasingly be standardized and in various ways computerized, then people with great talent are going to be needed in droves to organize the large quantities of complex legal content and processes that will need to be analyzed, distilled, and then embodied in standard working practices and computer systems. This new line of work will need highly skilled lawyers. The development of standard documents or procedures and the organization and representation of legal knowledge in computer systems is fundamentally a job of legal research and analysis, and often this knowledge engineering will be more intellectually demanding than conventional work. Working out a system that can solve many problems is generally more taxing than finding an answer to one problem. It is entirely misconceived to think, as many lawyers do, that work on standards and systems can be delegated to junior research or support lawyers. If a legal business is going to trade on the strength of outstanding standards and systems, then it will need outstanding lawyers involved in their design and development. These legal knowledge engineers will also be needed to undertake another central task, the basic analysis and decomposition of legal work that I claim will be required if legal work is to be multi-sourced effectively and responsibly. Legal knowledge engineering in the 21st century will not be a fringe show at the edge of the legal market. It will be a central occupation for tomorrow's lawyers. Fourth will be the legal risk manager. This category of lawyer is sorely needed and is long overdue. Senior in-house lawyers around the world insist that they are in the business of legal risk management. Clients prefer avoiding legal problems rather than resolving them. And yet, as I say in Section 6, hardly a lawyer or law firm on the planet has chosen to develop methods, tools, techniques, or systems to help their clients review, identify, quantify, and control the legal risks that they face. I expect this to change. Urgent demand from the market will lead lawyers, perhaps bolstered and emboldened by external funding, to offer a wide range of proactive legal services whose focus will be on anticipating and preempting legal problems. This will be quite different from legal work that concentrates on addressing specific deals or disputes. In some ways more like a form of strategy consulting, this legal work will be wider ranging and more generic, helping clients to prepare more responsibly for the future. Again, this is not a peripheral job for the legal fraternity. This could fundamentally change the way in which the law is practiced and administered. My final category of future lawyer is the legal hybrid. My premise here is that successful lawyers of the future, wherever they sit on my evolutionary path, will be increasingly multidisciplinary. Many already claim that they are deeply steeped in neighboring disciplines as project managers, strategy and management consultants, market experts, deal brokers, and more. In truth, though, these forays into other fields are not strategically conceived, formally planned, or supported by rigorous training. They are rather ad hoc and piecemeal initiatives. In contrast, legal hybrids of the future will be superbly schooled and genuinely expert in these related disciplines, and will be able to extend the range of the services they provide in a way that adds value for their clients. Taking these 5 categories together, it is clear that there will be work for lawyers to do in the future. What is much less obvious is whether today's lawyers will be equipped to take on the jobs I envisage. While the expert trusted advisor and the enhanced practitioner look much like contemporary lawyers, I predict that their number will be greatly reduced. The range of work of the expert trusted advisor will be reduced by standardization and computerization, while the enhanced practitioner's domain will be diminished by the emergence of alternative, lower-cost individuals who can work responsibly with standards and systems. In some areas of law, lawyers will be less dominant, while in others, where there are, for example, online legal services or there is legal open sourcing, they will no longer have a role. If the demand for conventional lawyers is reduced, I wonder how easily those whose jobs are threatened will be able to reskill and become legal knowledge engineers, legal risk managers, or legal hybrids. The transition may not be easy. In general terms, and to answer the question posed in the title of this book, I do not therefore anticipate, in the next 20 or 30 years at least, that there will be no lawyers. I expect instead that there will be significantly fewer lawyers providing traditional consultative advisory service, and I predict the emergence of new legal professionals with quite different roles in society. We will witness the end of many lawyers as we know and recognize them today, and the birth of a new streamlined and technology-based generation of practicing lawyers who are fit for purpose in the 21st century. In very broad terms, it seems to me that solicitors and in-house lawyers whose work is largely routine are those most threatened by the future I am predicting. There will soon be less costly and more convenient ways of delivering the service that today is their preserve. Of course, there are many solicitors and in-house lawyers who are highly specialized or are retained because of their special insight or their closeness to the business. For these advisors, the outlook is rather rosier, but lawyers must be honest with themselves and recognize frankly when their work might be sourced differently. The future of the work that is currently undertaken by barristers is generally encouraging. Most of this activity is highly bespoke, and it is hard to see how oral advocacy and the dispensing of expert advice can be standardized or computerized. Dispute avoidance and online dispute resolution will chip away at some of this domain, but I do not see these as eliminating advocacy entirely. Of greater concern to barristers in chambers should be major law firms who decide to resist the move to the right on my evolutionary path, Section 2, and instead build a far greater bespoke capability. This may involve amassing teams of high-powered legal solicitors with skills and expertise that rival those of barristers, or it may entail the recruitment of barristers to these firms, which raises questions about the best business vehicles for the delivery of legal services, see Section 8. A common response to much that I say by cynics, skeptics, and doubters runs simply and as follows: computers cannot replace legal work, full stop. I will leave to one side the fact that this really is a gross oversimplification of my thesis, in that it ignores what I say about standardization, commoditization, and the transfer of many legal tasks from lawyers to non-lawyers. But even as a claim only about the impact of technology on lawyers, it is weak. I respond in 2 parts. First of all, my interest is manifestly not in some wholesale, monolithic substitution of legal advisors by information technology, IT. Instead, my focus, as far as it is concerned, is on the extent to which some, much, or all of what lawyers do can be undertaken more quickly, less expensively, more conveniently, and in a less forbidding way by systems than by conventional work. The question I therefore prefer to ask in this context is, from the client's point of view, what tasks of lawyers will be better undertaken in the future by systems? It is a foolhardy lawyer indeed who unreflectively and dogmatically replies to this question by asserting none whatsoever. Open-minded lawyers, and ones who genuinely care about the interests of their clients, should, in the internet age, continually be looking at ways in which it can play a more prominent role in their services. And all of my experience of working with innumerable law firms and in-house legal departments leads me to claim that there is remarkable scope for greater deployment of technology. More radically, though, I do contend that for some lawyers, there are existing and emerging technologies whose widespread adoption will effectively render them redundant. Much the same has happened in many other sectors. Lawyers are not immune from the destructive effects of the internet and IT revolutions. I call technologies that threaten the work of today's lawyers and law firms disruptive legal technologies, see Chapter 4. They do not support or complement current legal practices. They challenge and replace them in whole or in part. This leads to the second part of my response to the non-believers. Most of the disruptive technologies that I identify, such as document assembly, personalized alerting, online dispute resolution, and open sourcing, are phenomena of which most practicing lawyers are only dimly aware. Also bear in mind that my predictions in this book and in the future of law are long-term predictions stretching to and beyond. If lawyers are barely conversant with today's technologies, they have even less sense of how much progress in legal technology is likely in the coming 10 years. Politely, it puzzles me profoundly that lawyers who know little about current and future technologies can be so confident about their inapplicability. To be able to claim responsibly that it will have no or minimal effect on lawyers, as many do, surely requires some considerable depth of insight into what disruptive technologies do and will do in years to come. My purpose in writing my book is precisely to provide that insight. I mention open-mindedness on the part of lawyers. I can honestly say that I know of no lawyer who has devoted serious time to exploring the impact of it on the legal profession, who has later abandoned legal technology and resumed normal business. On the contrary, lawyers who take the time to delve deeply into the possibilities invariably become committed advocates and practitioners. The commitment does not come generally in a matter of days or weeks. It takes, I find, months of study and exposure to practical case studies for the conversion to take place. Just as research by the Oxford Internet Institute suggests that people who have the least experience of the web are those who are generally most distrustful of it, I find a similar situation amongst lawyers. Often the most vociferous opponents of the Internet, those who see no possible application for emerging technologies in their firms, are precisely those who have near zero exposure to the systems in question. Just as in law, however, ignorance here should be no defense. There really is no merit whatsoever in blindly rejecting a set of new developments whose nature and scope are simply not understood. Moving away now from practicing lawyers, skeptical or otherwise, no analysis of the future of lawyers would be complete without some reflection on academic lawyers. In the first instance, it is clear that legal research has been transformed through technology. Whether as a top-notch scholar or a research student, the tools and facilities now available are wildly different from those of the past. An unparalleled range of resources are now to hand, delivered largely across the Internet. It is hard to imagine now the hassle involved in legal research 2 decades ago and more. We were largely constrained by the materials available in the libraries on the campuses in which we worked, with cumbersome and time-consuming processes to invoke if we wished to secure publications from elsewhere. For many legal scholars engaged in serious legal research, however, electronic mail and virtual communities are even more significant than the greatly extended volumes and resources that are available. When I worked on my doctorate in the 1980s, there was a lady at Stanford University in California who was beavering away on a thesis along similar lines. During the 3 years, we met once and exchanged a few letters, and I for one was frustrated that we could not interact more regularly. If we were working on our theses today, I suspect we would be in almost daily contact by email and participating together, no doubt in various groups on a social network or two. Scholars need no longer be isolated islands of solitary reflection. They can join or engage in far more cooperative and communal discussions and debates through social networks and blogs, for example. At the same time, academics think differently about publishing. In the 1980s, for example, it was common to wait over a year before a submitted manuscript appeared in print. Today, while conventional journals remain important, the legal blogosphere is a more immediate mechanism for rapidly sharing ideas. At the same time, we are able to use the Internet as a way of pre-publishing materials, so that ideas, theories, and findings can be publicized electronically prior to formal publication. I am greatly enthused by the extent of the take-up of technology by academics involved with legal research. I am much less confident that our law professors are sufficiently exploiting emerging technologies, such as e-learning (see Section 4), in the teaching of our law students. More worrying still, I fear that few law schools are preparing our future lawyers for the very different legal workplace that I and others are predicting. Few law students have any sense of the likely impact or relevance of, for example, the commoditization of legal services, multi-sourcing, or disruptive legal technologies. Law firms should encourage law schools to expose their students to likely trends and to think deeply about the new skills that will be needed in practice. A discussion of the future of lawyers would also be incomplete without another quick detour that looks at the key tool of their trade, the law book. I am often asked whether law books will survive. As a bibliophile and a gadget collector, I am torn. On the one hand, one of my favorite gadgets is a digital book by Sony known as the Reader. It is lightweight, the size of a DVD box with a print and paper-like display, and it can hold hundreds of books. It can connect to the internet and can handle sound and image. So why bother with legal tomes? Perhaps many years from now we will not. Many lawyers already prefer online law reports to conventional volumes, while the business of producing books has become secondary to online services for many legal publishers. Researching electronically is becoming natural, and when lawyers do want paper, they can print important pages. However, the old counterarguments remain. We like the touch, odor, and aura of books in libraries. Books are pleasant to own and collect. Reading a book seems easier and less prone to error than viewing on screen, and it is convenient to have many books open at once. So nostalgia, tradition, and some plausible practicalities may keep law books on the go for some time yet. There is another reason that the printed page may not die for some time. Unlike online resources, traditional articles and books are reassuringly finite. You know where you stand with print. The end is always in sight and in hand. Contents and index pages provide clear signposts, and although footnotes and bibliographies may send you scurrying for more, at least the original source is clearly bounded. Browsing the web, even in authoritative and well-conceived sites, is generally a more open-ended business. The innumerable links and the essential interconnectedness often give users a sense of a job never finished. It is not unusual to feel lost in cyberspace. After all, there are countless billions of pages out there. On balance, though, my prediction is that, over the next 20 years, sales of substantive law books will greatly reduce. As display technology, storage, and search improve, it will become increasingly quaint and inefficient to reach for the bookshelf. For readers who think this unlikely, think for a moment how few people of today consult traditional print-based encyclopedias. 8. The implications. What are the implications for the business of law of the predictions that I make about the future work of lawyers? 3 issues spring immediately to mind. The first concerns the structure and size of legal businesses, the second relates to innovation, and the third is about the type of people who will be lawyers in the future. I deal with each in turn. In relation to the structure of legal businesses, the traditional model for most law firms has been that of a pyramid, with equity partners, owners of the business, employing and running teams of junior lawyers. This provides leverage for the partners. They benefit financially not only from their own efforts, but from the surplus profit that is created through the work of their junior lawyers. A highly geared firm will have more junior lawyers per equity partner than a lowly geared firm, and all other things being equal, will be correspondingly more profitable. In accordance with this prevailing business model, law firms can only retain their profitability if this pyramidic structure is kept in place, and the broader the base, the better. However, in this book I am suggesting that there are alternative ways of sourcing the work that is currently performed by junior lawyers, for example by outsourcing or computerizing. In other words, many of the tasks currently undertaken by these junior lawyers, often in costly buildings in leading financial centers, can more efficiently, cheaply be done elsewhere or differently. More, the pyramidic structure is often also recognized as a source of unhappiness within law firms. The work that is parceled up and delegated to junior staff is often tedious drudgery, even if its discharge in quantity can be profitable. On the face of it, if the grunt work is outsourced or computerized, then the cost goes down and the sum of human happiness increases. A win-win. Perhaps it is for the client and the disgruntled employee, but it is not for many law firms. What is involved here is rather fundamental. Subcontracting or computerizing work will result in a different shape of business model underpinning law firms. In summary, legal businesses make much of their money today from leveraging their junior people. If that leverage is displaced, then the profits will dip. Of course, not all areas of work can be outsourced or computerized or sourced in other ways, and so the threat is not generic. But I maintain much can and will. This will not finish law firms but will necessitate major structural change in the long run. For example, it may lead very large firms to give up routine work, or multi-source it, and to build instead a much narrower pyramid with a lower proportion of junior lawyers to partners. Profitability might be retained by seeking to charge more for the genuinely expert lawyers who are perched atop the pyramid dispensing bespoke advice. I can envisage various medium-sized firms merging to achieve a critical mass of experts, while divesting themselves of some of the junior lawyers who previously had been central to their business model. On this philosophy, though, I also expect that some very expert and experienced lawyers will leave large firms and set up niche practices, characterized by strong market reputation and track record, outstanding people, modest gearing, and very high hourly rates or fixed fees. I fear for the future of very small firms whose work is not highly specialized, those with a handful of partners or even sole practitioners who are general practitioners. Unless their clients want to retain them for a highly personalized service, I cannot see how they will be able to compete with alternative methods of sourcing, whether by much larger law firms or by alternative providers. The business model that supports the work of barristers may also be subject to change. While these trusted expert advisors will still be in demand, according to my thinking at least, there may be other commercial structures from which they can operate. The current model at the bar, the self-employed sole practitioner who shares various services with fellow barristers, assumes no gearing, little capacity to multi-source, and few mechanisms for hedging against the risks of being a one-person band. There is probably scope here for running the shared services more effectively through various forms of alternative sourcing. But some barristers might find it more comfortable to move to the highly niche expert firms that I am predicting, or even, as has already happened, to very large firms. Whether or not the age-old split of the profession between barristers and solicitors makes sense in the legal world I foresee, I defer for discussion on another day. The premise for any such debate, however, should be open-mindedness and not a reactionary preference for the status quo. As for innovation, it is apparent that lawyers are heading for a time of great change, and so we should ask whether and how lawyers, firms, and the profession might be the authors of this transformation. Should lawyers be innovating, or setting up research and development programs to cope in the new world? For the law firm, there are three broad ways in which it can innovate. In the way in which it delivers its services, perhaps through some groundbreaking online system. In the actual advice it offers, for instance, a novel form of contractual arrangement. Or in the way the business is run, for example, in the way in which graduates are recruited. In the context of this book, innovation in the first and second senses are relevant. I discuss the need to meet market demands by introducing new ways of sourcing legal work, and note also that if lawyers want to live by bespoke work alone, then they will need continually to develop imaginative new solutions. I know from my work on legal technology, however, that lawyers do not find it easy to innovate, especially in the way in which they deliver their services. Historically, UK law firms have a stronger track record than US practices in technological innovation that benefits clients. The local market in the UK has been more competitive, and there has been much stronger demand from clients. But how has innovation been achieved here? Management textbooks might suggest that these innovations will have flowed elegantly from the insights of management consultants, from lengthy strategy documents, from market research, and from away days devoted to blue sky, out-of-the-box, and lateral thinking. Not a bit of it. The reality is that the overwhelming number of innovations have evolved from the efforts of mavericks within law firms. Energetic, often eccentric, frequently marginalized, invariably demanding, single-minded individuals who pursue ideas that are regarded in the early days as peripheral, irrelevant, and even wasteful. But the mavericks persevere, and in their dining rooms or studies at home they beaver away, creating new forms of service for clients. Gradually, their innovations come to be recognized as significant and even client-winning. And soon, everyone claims that the mavericks had the firm's full support from the outset. A new discipline thus emerges, maverick management. This is the art of nurturing and encouraging mavericks, giving them space to innovate and wrapping some strategy and structure around their innovations only once their ideas have fully gestated. Mavericks are the research and development departments of many law firms. Why have US firms exhibited an apparent indifference towards it that directly helps clients? Generally, I have found that the major American firms have resisted serious investment beyond their own back offices. They have often rejected knowledge systems and document assembly systems, for example, even though these can actually enhance or simplify client service. I believe they have done so because there has been little incentive to do otherwise. It is not easy to convince a group of millionaires within clear sight of retirement that their business model is wrong and that they should change direction and embrace new technologies. The top US law firms have been massively and satisfyingly profitable. Accordingly, they seem to be moved to change more by the threat of competitive disadvantage than by the promise of competitive advantage. Without hunger for change, without the worry of being left behind by the competition, and vitally, without clients clamoring for new forms of service, it will be business as usual for the US legal behemoths for many years yet, unless the credit crunch hits hard. They will wring every last cent out of the increasingly unsustainable practice of hourly billing and will steer well clear of innovative IT, unless, of course, clients demand otherwise. Should lawyers be technology pioneers? When they hear say about the great promise of wikis and blogs, or of the likely impact of e-learning and automated document assembly, should legal practitioners reach enthusiastically for their checkbooks or more reflectively for stiff single malt? Broadly, when new technologies loom, a law firm can embrace one of three strategies. The first is to resist. Whether grounded in fear, ignorance, conservatism, or insight, the purpose of resistance is to delay investment, often in expectation that the technology has been overhyped. Alternatively, many senior partners hope they can hold out until retirement before the latest systems engulf them. Either way, Ned Ludd would have been proud. The second strategy is to prepare. This may be a grudging preparation for the fateful day when clients or competitors leave the firm with no option but to invest. Or it may be part of a master plan, according to which the firm is like a finely tuned track athlete, poised at the final bend to pass and surge away from the early pacemakers. The third strategy is indeed to pioneer, to lead the way, and in so doing to try to achieve first-mover advantage. Successful pioneering in it is not temporary pacemaking. It is about continually striving to keep ahead of the pack and reaping substantial rewards as a result. In the world of IT, however, there is much debate about its benefits. The whimsical skeptics often say you can recognize the pioneers by the arrows in their backs. The pioneers, it is jested, work at the bleeding edge rather than the leading edge. Flippancies aside, a more profound challenge to pioneers was recently laid down by Konstantinos Markides and Paul Jurowski of London Business School. They argue in their book Fast Second that pioneering thinkers of radically new business ideas do not necessarily excel in commercially exploiting them. The idea of online bookselling came from an Ohio-based bookseller and not from Amazon. What about law? In truth, it is not yet clear whether it pays for lawyers to innovate and pioneer in IT. Did great benefits accrue to firms that led the way, for instance in advanced financial systems, document management systems, or in human resource systems? Was the investment in the early bespoke systems worth it, or might it have been better to wait for off-the-shelf solutions? The systems just noted, no matter how trailblazing, were for internal use within law firms. In contrast, competitive advantage will be achieved by firms when the technologies in question touch the lives of their clients, by providing new ways of working together or in packaging legal advice as online or embedded offerings. If technology can help to deliver cheaper or better service, many clients will sign up. That said, client-facing pioneering is not sufficient to sustain advantage. The trick here is not just to deploy the first workable system, but to make it impossible or unattractive for competitors to imitate, and inconvenient or undesirable for clients to switch allegiance. Although this book anticipates a veritable revolution in the nature of legal services, the changes I predict and advocate will not come about in one big bang. Rather, through a process of what I like to call incremental revolution, lawyers and their clients will change their ways in significant steps rather than huge leaps, but collectively these steps will add up to a very different legal world. What about the types of people who will be our best lawyers in the future? It follows from what I say in this book that tomorrow's lawyers can and should be far more efficient and businesslike in the running of their practices, that they can and should be far more transparent in communicating with those that they advise and in exposing their working methods, and that large latent markets of unmet need can be realized and satisfied by delivering professional guidance as commoditized online service. The arguments and findings in this book call not only for a de-skilling and reskilling of lawyers, and for some fairly fundamental reconfiguration of legal businesses, but perhaps more fundamentally, for very different kinds of people working in the legal profession. I have been heavily influenced in my thinking in this context by an exceptionally thought-provoking book by Daniel Pink, A Whole New Mind. Published in two, Pink argues that the last few decades have belonged to a certain kind of person with a certain kind of mind, computer programmers who could crack code, lawyers who could craft contracts, MBAs who could crunch numbers. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. The future belongs to a very different kind of person with a very different kind of mind, creators and empathizers, pattern recognizers and meaning makers. These people, artists, inventors, designers, storytellers, caregivers, consolers, big picture thinkers, will now reap society's richest rewards and share its greatest joys. In themes that resonate with some of the central messages of this book, Pink imagines a world where automation and outsourcing are commonplace, and when goods and services are in such abundance that design rather than functionality distinguishes one from another. Applying Pink's thinking to the legal world, the keys to the kingdom, as he puts it, will pass from the traditional, analytical, logical legal mind to a more creative and imaginative cadre of lawyers. His thesis applied to law would suggest that much legal work will either be outsourced or automated, and that which remains will be distinguishable on grounds of packaging and presentation more than on expertise. This certainly reflects an observation frequently made by in-house lawyers, that most good law firms are indistinguishable in terms of their legal expertise. This knowledge is taken for granted. At beauty parades and in bids for work, it is the flair, style, and presentation that often distinguishes one from another. Looking forward, I expect this to continue to be the case in relation to what I call enhanced practitioners, although it may hold less with respect to the finest legal experts, operating at their rarefied heights of the largest deals and disputes in the kingdom. Pink also argues his case by suggesting that there will be a shift away from the dominance of left-brain thinkers to those of greater right-brain capacity. There is some interesting overlap here with the set of observations I made in Section 5, in relation to lawyers' inability to empathize with their clients. If Pink's analysis is right, the legal world today is dominated by left-brain thinkers who will not find it easy to empathize. And of course, there is an interesting correlation here between the male brain and the female brain. Following the analysis of Simon Baron-Cohen in his first-rate book, The Essential Difference, the typical male brain systematizes while the female brain empathizes. Pulling all of these strands together, if my analysis in this book is sound, and the twin forces of commoditization and it do indeed combine to create a legal environment in which much legal work is standardized and computerized, then we can well imagine that those individuals who are in future responsible for innovating, designing, marketing, and selling a multi-sourced legal service will not be traditional left-brain males, but far more creative, innovative, artistic, and often female lawyers. These individuals will inhabit a very different legal world, different not simply because lawyers will be drawn from a wider gene pool. The more fundamental difference, and we should not be deterred from noting this by dwelling too much on major law firms, is that a new interface will emerge between the non-lawyer and the law, between the citizen and the state. This is a central theme of the book. Traditionally, in a print-based industrial society with an advanced legal system, much of the law, legislation, case law, and standard practice is inaccessible to most lay people. There is too much law, it is too complex, and its impact is often not at all obvious to the non-lawyer. The legal profession has evolved to help to manage, interpret, and apply the law. This body of lawyers has become the principal interface between the law and the people. However, I am suggesting that possible new interfaces are emerging, so that lawyers will not, in the long run, be the only means of securing access to legal understanding and justice. Indeed, it will transpire, for the ordinary affairs of most citizens, that lawyers are not even the dominant interface. For many lawyers, the idea of new legal interfaces may seem anathema to the very nature of professional service. Some will argue that a truly professional service is an irreducibly human service. But what do clients think? From my various research and consulting projects, I have discerned two broad views of the legal professional. The first might be called the trust model, according to which clients put trust in legal professionals largely because of who they are perceived to be. Lawyers are considered to be experts with competence and state-of-the-art knowledge not possessed by lay people, and on this view they are regarded as the benevolent custodians of the law and legal institutions, ideally qualified to guide non-lawyers in relevant legal intricacies. But there is a second view, and this I call the George Bernard Shaw model. In accordance with this, as Shaw famously noted, all professions are conspiracies against the laity. This view regards legal professionals not as benevolent custodians, but as jealous guards who have for too long hindered access to the law and legal processes. On balance, I think it is unhelpful to generalize about the motives of lawyers across the profession. I have little doubt that, within the legal population, there are both benevolent custodians and jealous guards. Either way, I do feel passionately that if IT-based services or other forms of sourcing can give rise to a quicker, better, more widely available or cheaper service than that offered today, then I support these innovations wholeheartedly, even if their effect is financially disadvantageous to some lawyers. And I support these innovations wholeheartedly, even if their effect is financially disadvantageous to some lawyers. It is unhelpful to generalize about the motives of lawyers across the profession. I have little doubt that within the legal population there are both benevolent custodians and jealous guards. Either way, I do feel passionately that if IT-based services or other forms of sourcing can give rise to a quicker, better, more widely available or cheaper service than that offered today, then I support these innovations wholeheartedly, even if their effect is financially disadvantageous to some lawyers. technology-based services or other forms of sourcing can give rise to a quicker, better, more widely available, or cheaper service than that offered today, then I support these innovations wholeheartedly, even if their effect is financially disadvantageous to some lawyers.